Welcome to the Coached Success Podcast. This podcast is aimed at connecting you with the ways top performers think about challenges so that you can adapt your thinking accordingly and live your version of ultra extraordinary. So today on the call we have Russell Julius. Russell, thank you for taking the call at 5:30 a.m. in South Africa.
Hey, Carl, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. I'm honored.
Thank you. So, Russell, do you want to tell us who is Russell?
Well, the best way I can answer that is that I am a child of God. That's my identity that I build everything else around. And yes, I'm an entrepreneur, business owner, and the rest I'm still figuring out.
I take it life is just a process or a journey of figuring things out. I don't think there's any
Yeah,
one set plan. And as long as we have that perception of I'm always a student, I'm always open to learning, then I don't think we can
100%.
do
Yeah,
wrong. Okay.
yeah.
And then, so you mentioned that you are a child of God and that everything centers around this. Tell me a bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how faith plays a major part in this.
Yeah, so early on in my entrepreneur journey, which was in my semi-final year of studies,
Mm-hmm.
I graduated in 2014, and what happened was I did fairly well, and I attracted the attention of a few people, and I suppose entered into some mentorship relationships, which unfortunately taught me the mentality of what we see the Silicon Valley type startup culture, so move fast and break things and that,
Mm-hmm.
all that. And I very quickly learned that that really wasn't who I am, and those mentors who I had earlier on weren't necessarily believers.
Mm-hmm.
So I formed some habits there and thought patterns with regards to building business that actually wasn't correlating with who I am at my core.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time, or not a long time, but it took me quite a while to get out of that. And when you face some challenges and you feel like life's handed you back your ass, you feel like, okay, now it's time for reflecting and all that kind of thing. So I think for the past 2 years I've really been intent on building everything in my business every day, doing things in a way that I think it's according to the kingdom of God,
Mm-hmm.
kingdom principles. And I do feel like I feel more at peace. The business journey, there's a little bit more challenges because I'm not operating according to what the worldly advice would be, the best practices. But I'm doing my business journey very practical. And it's, when you come from a small town, you only have your reputation, right? You only have your
Mm-hmm.
namesake. If you have a good name, people will trust you. And I think, with business in the past, there's such a big market out there. If these few customers or those few clients, if I shorted them or they don't like my style, okay, that's fine. But I think with the of the world, we've kind of moved back to that small town thing, in the sense of when one customer or one client feels shorted by you, they go online and they can basically let everybody else know. It almost echoes the small town thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's getting back to basics with things like integrity, sticking to your word, being on time, something that I'm actually working on as well, time management. But things like being on time, and I feel like if you're always just going to be transparent about it, stop saying, for example, this is how I speak to myself, just to give you some insight. Carl doesn't deserve your excuses about it's 5:30 and whatever, you're late. Tell Carl, I'm sorry about your 5 minutes. I'm still working on my time management. And now Carl knows, look, Russell doesn't disrespect me, or this isn't his style. He's aware that it's not okay. So things like transparency, open communication, I feel those kind of things breed trust. And that's how I do business as well. And I think that just fosters for more genuine relationships. It's
Mm-hmm.
not transaction. And most of our businesses at African Leadership are service-based businesses. So that requires strong relationships with clients. And so that's how I'm building business, and that's how I intend to do it, for the foreseeable
Yes.
future. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like it. You mentioned a couple of things there that I really like. First of all, the fact about the importance of communication. And many times we think that communication is just me saying something,
Yeah.
then I expect you to get what I'm saying. But like you said there, it's effectively letting the other person know exactly what you intend that person to get from the message.
Yeah.
And that is where many
Yeah.
people go wrong, because maybe for you personally, you're like, you know what, it's 5 minutes, it's not that bad. And now you expect that
Hmm.
other person to also see it like that. But whereas if you
Yeah.
can just let the other person know that this is the reasons behind it, and just be
Yeah.
doing that makes the next person understand. You also mentioned another critical principle to our own growth and learning, that is, we need to look at what we can take from others, but then obviously we need to refine that. So you mentioned about
Yeah.
being around people who were mentors to you, but that their approach didn't completely align with who you are and your values. And
Hmm.
many times there are lots of people who we admire, especially in the online world right now. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know what, I need to accept every single thing that they do or the way they think.
100%.
I
Yeah.
look at what is important from them. What
Hmm.
characteristics can I take out and build in myself that aligns with who
100%.
I want to be? That's the most important thing.
I was just saying, one of my current mentors, he always
Hmm.
says, when you can learn from anybody, what he says is always be a student, never be a follower. So you can see people on social media and their lifestyle might not align with your values, but there's always something that you can learn from them, whether it's in the business sense or anywhere else. So be a student, not a follower, because the difference there is, if we're a student, and I'm sure you would know this or you're on the same page, if you're a student, you learn and you apply that to who you are in your growth. You're refining yourself, becoming more of who you are. And I think the following thing becomes where we see a successful personality somewhere out there and we try and emulate their path or
Hmm.
their ways. I mean, I've seen a lot of young entrepreneurs who are talented guys or girls. They have a unique perspective, but they start making videos that echoes Gary Vee. They start dropping F-bombs left, right, and center
Yes.
because they
Hmm.
think, okay, now that clear cut, that's like,
Hmm.
what a no-nonsense, straight to the point entrepreneur sounds like. And Gary Vee, for example, drops so much knowledge, and take what is valuable for you, but don't take on that person's personality.
Exactly.
Stay true to yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's powerful because, like you said, we don't want to become a copycat. We don't want to become that person. We just want to
Yeah.
see what we can gain from that person because, like you said, everybody can teach us something if we're willing to
Yeah.
learn, to listen and to actually open our eyes and see how did they attain that level of success in their particular
Yeah.
area, or how do they think about life, and trying to see
Mhm.
how you can apply it to yourself. And then
Yeah.
tell me, Russell, about your upbringing. What led you down the path of entrepreneurship?
So, to be honest, well, nothing in my upbringing led me down the path of entrepreneurship. And I'm going to be super transparent here because
Hmm.
I feel otherwise I would be wasting your time and your viewers' time.
Hmm.
So, I was very gifted academically from the get-go. I was one of those annoying kids who never had to study for anything. And then I'll just get 100% and win the whole year academically. So that was pretty much my entire schooling career up to about middle end of grade 10. So what happened was, like I said, I was very gifted academically. For example, I could read a few pages, close the book, and write verbatim what I just read. I was one of those annoying kids who would call the teacher in the middle of an exam and point out the problem is in the math problem that they gave us, how their thing is. So because of that, it just came naturally to me. I never developed a good or strong work ethic because I never had to study. But close to the middle, really to the end of my grade 10 year, my parents started going through a divorce process. And our family, or in my view, in my perspective, my parents, they never drank, never really swore or anything like that. Like I said earlier to you in our conversation, my dad was a Sunday school teacher. So I had this view of this perfect family. When people in the neighborhood around would need help, they would come to my parents, can you help me with my CV, that kind of thing. So I had this view of, my family is. So it really rocked my world. And one of the ways being the youngest in the family, I felt, and I'm sure everybody else felt like that as well, I felt that I was being the shoulder to everybody else. But how that affected me was I just couldn't focus. From having the ability to remember that 5 pages verbatim, and I had to now find myself where I have to reread like a sentence 2 or 3 times to really comprehend. And I was so shocked and afraid by this. I didn't know, what do you do with this, right? So my plan was I was going to go study actuarial science.
Hmm.
Since about grade 8, grade 9, I've been looking at, okay, what subject do I need to take for this? What bursaries are available for this? And I pretty much had had it mapped out, right? But because of this concentration issue, I couldn't do that because my marks had just declined, right? So I was going from a 99, 100% average to mid 60s, and that's not what they want to see when you go for actuarial science. So my options, to be 100% honest, my options when I got to matriculation were very limited. So I ended up studying business administration, and just to do something, right? I ended up studying business administration, and I did it through an approved learning partner with Harriet Watt University in the UK. So I did it here in Cape Town, but it was they had a campus here. It was because I was intent on going to the UK when I graduate, and I felt, okay, having a UK qualification might make it a little bit easier, landing an internship there or whatever. But somewhere in the middle of my studies, I realized that I actually want to be part of the solution in South Africa, building the economy and so forth and so on. So at the time, I was playing club rugby, right? So I couldn't work I didn't want to work on the weekends because I wanted to play rugby instead. So I had to find an alternative means of earning some money while I'm a student and playing rugby. So I started a car wash in my complex where I lived. And every Friday we would have like about anywhere between 20 to 30 cars Friday evenings that we were washing. And, we're charging these people like 85 Rand per car. And I mean, that for a weekly thing, that's not bad. And so I did that every Friday evening. And then, I had my cash in hand for the next week, you know. So that was my first taste of like informal trade. And then in my final year, or before my final year. So my first year of study was in 2010, right? And I just turned 18.
Okay.
So yeah, in 2010, that was also when the soccer World Cup was in South Africa. So my focus wasn't really on studies that year. So there were 2 modules or so that I didn't make, right? So I had to complete those 2 modules before I did my final year, which meant that my graduation was deferred a year, actually. I had a 6-month gap. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do in these 6 months, right? In my mind, I'm still a student. It's still part of my studying time period. What am I going to do? Get an internship somewhere, just get a job to earn cash? Or at this point, I pretty much decided that I want to own my own business. I'm like, okay, well, why don't I start something that's going to give me some real taste of business, right? So I started a home-based bakery. So what I did was I got like a recipe book and I put some treats out of it. And I made samples, and I went to, what's this place called? I can't remember. But I made samples in these like cute like little party boxes, and I stapled like a small card of all the things that we have. And I went to all the coffee shops. I come from Somerset West, so I went to I lived there at the time, and all the coffee shops. And I went to Somerset Mall, and I dropped off and I said, "Oh, these samples in here. This is the list of the stuff we have available. These are the contact details. Let me know." So I dropped off, and within I think a month or so, we're supplying about 6 coffee shops sustainably. Like every week, we had to drop off things there. And then a few cafes that, when you order cappuccino, the little cookies that come with it, usually they serve like a little cookie. So we're delivering, I think, about 10 kilograms of that a week.
Okay.
So just small things like that. And I was pretty proud of what we had done within 6 months with no startup costs at all. And, at the end of it, it was running quite nicely. And I was like, okay, well, do I carry on with this now, or do I just leave it for what it was, this project, right? And it was called Consensual Delights, right? And I was so proud of the name as well. I thought it was super clever. And so that was my first taste of more structured business, right? So the car wash was just kind of like show up, do the thing, cheers. But with the Consensual Delights, there was branding involved. Now I had to design a logo, pick a name, start on packaging, which products are going to be the most cost effective to produce, that had a lot of similar ingredients so that you can bulk buy the ingredients, all these kind of things. The first time I had to think in that way. And I enjoyed that process so much, and I was pretty set on, I'm definitely going to go into business, right? And that was in my final year. And I just wrote in my final exam. About a week after that, I was offered an internship. And this internship with MPC Recruitment, it's a recruitment firm that were bought by EOH. And they were offering me, I think, 6,000 Rand a month, something like that, for an internship. So I was like, well, I don't have anything else lined up. It's a week after my exam. Why not, right? So I was like, okay, cool, guys. Thanks. I know at least my stipend is there, and it gives me some time to figure things out. So I did that, and loved the people there, hated the job. And I did it for about 7 months. But in the meantime, I was building a website called kpmall.com. kpmall.com was basically an online, a boutique. I call it a boutique mall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would build a page for every maker with only their products on, right? So tabs at the top with the vendors. And these would be like people who make furniture or leather products or whatever it is, right? These are amazing makers, but they don't really want to do the business sales side of it, or they just are incapable of doing the business sales side of it. So I took that off their hands and I said, you know what, I'll stock your things on kpmall.com and I'll do the marketing for you and I'll do the sales for you and handle the courier. So I did all that with no prior experience. I actually got a developer to build a website.
Mm-hmm.
He was about 40% there and he moved. And he just kind of told me, sorry, man, I moved and like, that's it. So here's something that I'd already paid the guy for. He left the job incomplete and what was I to do? So I jumped in and I built the site myself. I've never been a computer person and I basically on the job taught myself how to build a website, right? And the site was live. And then I started organizing photo shoots for the products. I would have someone deliver the things at the studio, you know, and I
Mm-hmm.
did that and we started selling. And that went on for about 18 months. And then I realized, well, at the time I thought the business isn't sustainable. The margins on the sales are too small because the vendors had their selling prices and I add mine on top of it, but I can't add too much because then I'll hurt
Mm-hmm.
the potential sale. So what am I going to do? And I just didn't have runway because I didn't have any capital or investment. And yeah, that was it. And I closed it down eventually, but in hindsight, it was actually premature. I think there was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of potential there and I should have just stuck it out. But again, at that point, I didn't have any mentors, right? And actually, this interesting story there as well. You know, a friend of mine had come into some money, right?
Yeah.
His father, for his 21st birthday, his father gave him a couple of million rand. And this
Hey, nice.
guy, it's not bad, not a bad 21st.
Exactly.
So he convinced me to invest in KP more and I was reluctant, but eventually I was like, yo, this would be great. So what happened was before the launch of this shop, I was like, okay, cool. Well, with that, I would cover my stipend that I was receiving from
Mm-hmm.
MPC Recruitment plus any other expenses. So 7 months into the internship, I left that to focus full time on KP More. And this is around the time that I discovered that I actually have to build the site myself. So it took a little bit longer than was discussed with the investor. Also being inexperienced businessman at that time, he started growing like, he panicked, right? Because they're like, hey, is this thing going to take off? And he just kind of went cold turkey on me. And I had run up quite a bit of expenses with service providers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was left holding the bag. I mean, I don't blame him. I'm sure that from his perspective, you know, it was justified because here's this guy, it doesn't seem that the site is going anywhere, you know. Well, we were like a month or 2 months behind schedule, which now it's normal for a startup.
Yeah.
You know, there's so, but at that time you don't know, you just think I'm doing something wrong. So I understand that, but it put me in a really awkward position at the time. And again, in the deep end of the pool right now,
Yeah.
trying not to drown. And so I overcame that eventually and I managed to pay off those debts that the company had run up. And yeah, so that was KP Mall. That was my first business. But through that
Mm-hmm.
also, through having to learn how to build my own site and so on, and having done a lot of the marketing, at the time it was Twitter, heavy Twitter, and then Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I wasn't about to compete with SEO or not SEO with Google ads, whatever, because there's big budget involved there,
Yeah.
right? So all our sales were driven from Twitter and Facebook. And when I closed KP Mall, I realized, well, these people who I served through KP Mall, they still need help with exposure, with marketing, with advertising. And so I formed what at the time was called Spiral Social Media.
Okay.
And social media was servicing basically small to medium enterprises, actually micro, small to medium
Mm-hmm.
enterprises. And that was it. So that was the birth of Spiral Social Media, which now today is Spiral Marketing and PR. And we do web development, you know, digital marketing, public relations and communications. So that was Spiral Marketing. And then in end of 2017, I registered a company called Human Touch Recruitment
Mm-hmm.
because again, back when I was studying, I was okay. I want to be part of the solution in South Africa, you know, and my heart is ready to employ people build businesses firstly on kingdom principles, and then employ people in these businesses so that they are people who have access to better things, so they can put their children in better schools or
Mm-hmm.
in a good school. They can have access to quality healthcare, right? At their workplace, they are treated in a way where they are seen, they are valued, they are developed, because now that parent goes home feeling fulfilled, not feeling used and drained, but feeling
Mm-hmm.
fulfilled. How does that affect how they interact with their child, right? Now that child has a better sense of self-esteem, a better sense of fulfillment, and that child goes to school and he just learns on a much different level. He interacts with his peers on a much different level. They interact with their neighbors on a much different level. So my vision there is to, affect a neighborhood by how you
Yes.
treat your employee.
Mm-hmm.
That neighborhood will affect the town, right? Affect enough towns that becomes the city. You get what I'm going. You can really
Yes, I do.
change the culture or the narrative of your country, of your nation, by how you treat your employees, and I think that starts with how you treat yourself. So why I started Human Touch Recruitment was, I was like, my business isn't at a level where I can employ 100 people.
Yes.
But what we can do is we can help 100 people find employment. We can plug them into employment opportunities. So that was Human Touch. And obviously I had that internship with MPC Recruitment. So I had kind of the blueprint for how they
Mm-hmm.
operated. So I implemented that, and Human Touch Recruitment is still going. Obviously, took a bit of a knock with the COVID, because a lot of
Yeah.
companies were like, oh, we don't know what the next year is going to hold for us. We're not going to hire any people now. But we hung on there, and we're still swinging. And so that's at the moment. We have Spiral Marketing Solutions, Human Touch Recruitment, a company called Upelele,
Mm-hmm.
commercial cleaning and maintenance. And the goal there is very much in line also with what I discussed now about getting people in. And Bilele with commercial cleaning, if you look at cleaners, it's most often like the more economically vulnerable people who take cleaning jobs. And I mean, my grandma, after her husband died, she was a housewife for 30 plus years. Husband dies, 3 kids to raise. Her only option was to become a char, right? So
Mm-hmm.
she was a cleaner. And in that experience, or while she was cleaning, she had an opportunity to go and study nursing, which was her childhood dream. And she became a nurse at the age of 52. And
Wow.
she worked as a nurse until about 70 years old, right? And she passed away at 73. But her final years, she was able to live out her passion and a dream, and she touched so many lives. She was also a Christian lady. She did frail care, right? For
Mm-hmm.
so many people on their deathbeds, she was able to lead them in a salvation prayer, right?
Okay.
And for me, that's so special, because it tells me that the visions and the dreams that you have, God placed that in your heart, and you can learn to live without it. You can learn to be content without, but you will never get to be the fullest expression of who you are until you pursue those things, right? And
Yes.
for her, I mean, she had a 30-year journey of being passive, being a housewife, etc. But later on in her life, that passion or that thing was still there, and she
Yes.
had the opportunity to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I see that as like, wow, I can now take a job somewhere at a company and earn a stable income, and have my Audi and my 2-bedroom apartment, and I would have the picture of success, right, to the outside world.
Yes.
But does that bring me closer to the vision and the dream that God has placed in my heart?
Yeah.
Doesn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I have to decide, well, for the next 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years, am I willing to humble myself in pursuit, staying true to that vision, trusting
Mm-hmm.
God, doing my part by developing myself and putting in the hours, putting in the work, in pursuit of that, that journey, that dream? Or am I gonna, kind of be content and be happy? Because you can learn to live without things, but I think you're taking away from the world if you're not staying true to who you are, or who you feel God has called you to be. And you mentioned what keeps you going, how you overcome things. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
your core question. And I think for me, it's just all about, the only reason I exist is to live out the purpose that God has created me for. So I feel like emotionally things might get tough, which they do almost on a daily. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, it gets tough on the daily. It's emotionally draining, it's physically draining, but there's something bigger, right? And it's not just for the one day when we are employing 500 people or 1,000 people. It's also in the journey. There's a
Yes.
podcast called Kingdom Capitalists. And the one guy said, as a kingdom capitalist, basically, you feel like God has called you into business so that you can give generally into ministry. So he says, as kingdom capitalists, we often think that our role is to fund the missionary trip or the missionary journeys or the church stuff, because they do the redemptive work. They reach the people and save hearts and all that kind of stuff. But our daily work is also part of God's redemptive plan. So
Mm-hmm.
how we interact with people, how are we being a picture of Christ? Right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing now, it drives me to be like, okay, I can enjoy this journey because there's value in this journey as well. Even though, and I'm not trying to put up a picture of anything, even though I'm not making the bank that I want to be making, we're on a
Mm-hmm.
journey. And I think you never really get to a point where you feel like, okay, well, I'm done now, I'll just stay here. You always want to grow more, you
Yes.
always want to grow your business more. So I feel like that really drives me, knowing that and fully believing that I am walking the purpose that God has called me to walk. And that drives me. That is
Nice.
what pulls me forward.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Russell. First of all, thank you for that deep insight into your journey and what
Yeah.
started you out in entrepreneurship and obviously facing the challenges, like you said, with your parents' divorce. And I can just imagine, as a teenager, your parents going through a divorce and you were a student, like you said, and now all of a sudden you're struggling. So it must have been hard. You understand the impact it made on you, thinking like, okay, what now? But that actually made you who you are today. Had it not been for that challenge, you probably wouldn't have been able to adapt. Okay. Also be able to see the opportunity and how to seize the opportunity in the moment and become an opportunity creator
Yeah.
because you were so used to just being a student. And that's what I've seen a lot with a lot of people. And even if I look at my own life, where when you shy away from the hard times, you don't really
Yeah.
develop that ability to stand up to the tough times, because tough times are going to come. But how do
Yeah.
we embrace it? That's the most important thing, the perception we take
Yeah.
on it. And like you said, your journey has been long and you're still not where you want to be, but you are making an
Yeah.
impact. You're starting to make the impact now, and
Yeah.
also you're living true to your
100%.
purpose. And that's the most important thing. What I liked as well is the fact that you said that just living in alignment with your vision on a daily basis and
Mm.
embracing the journey of life, because sometimes we get so stuck on this endpoint. I want to get there, I want to get it to this destination, but what are we doing? We're rushing the journey, we're rushing our journey, and part of the journey is learning the little details of each and every day and each and every moment. There are
Yeah.
things that we can take for us personally, but then also give back to others along this
100%.
journey.
Yeah.
So awesome
Yeah.
job on, like you say, empowering people, whether it's through your businesses, your business ventures, and your daily living.
Yeah.
Okay.
To cut on that, I just want to say,
Mm-hmm.
the empowering people that, so with Upilele, commercial cleaning and
Mm-hmm.
maintenance, the whole business model is built around empowering people. So we're taking on those people and we've actually developed it's not fully developed yet, but we've developed a development program. So everybody that would be an employee at Upilele as a cleaner or a maintenance person, they would also go through a period of onboarding, evaluation, and we put in a personal development program where if it's that they need to do their matric certificate or get their
Mm-hmm.
license, driver's license, or they have all those things, but they are interested in learning coding. We've got partners who are willing to give a few hours of week coding training. So just to upskill those people so that they can have access to better employment opportunities. The idea isn't for you to be cleaning for the next 5 years so that we can have peace of mind that we trust you and we know you. The idea is for you to get to where you want to get to and be earning an honest income in the meantime. So
Mm-hmm.
that's Upilele, mate, and we're really excited about that. But also on the development thing, the way you put it now reminded me of the story of the boy and the caterpillar. I don't know if you've heard it. So there's a story. It's more like an anecdote. The boy and the caterpillar. So the boy was playing in the garden, right? This story goes. The boy was playing in the garden, and he saw a caterpillar breaking out of its cocoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was laying there watching it and it was slowly coming out and he left, right? The next day he came, it was about halfway out but not fully yet, and he watched the thing because he wants to see, he wants to see the thing crawl out and fly away, butterfly, and it just wasn't happening. And every time we would just like move a little bit out of the cocoon until the boy grew impatient and he helped the caterpillar, right?
Mm-hmm.
He helped him and he peeled away the cocoon. And what happened was, instead of the caterpillar, being free from the cocoon and then flying away or whatever, it died.
Yeah.
And the boy later learned that the caterpillar actually needs to go through that process of shedding the cocoon, because that's when it develops the muscles and the things for the wings to spread and whatever. And I think that, by us trying to expedite our development process,
Mm-hmm.
our growth process, we're actually taking that away from ourselves. Like you said, what I experienced that prepared me for who I am today. And if I didn't go through that, or I wouldn't have been prepared for what I've been called to steward today. So that's a very interesting anecdote always for me,
Yes.
and just always tells me, like, if I may, you said you gave me permission, remember, to bring in faith as much as I want.
Yes, you can go
So,
ahead.
so in the word of God, it says that the Lord leads us along righteous paths for his name's sake.
Mm-hmm.
So righteous paths in ancient Israel, there were a lot of goat herders, right, or
Mm-hmm.
shepherds. There were a lot of hills, grassy hills. So they would go and take their flock around the hill, and it would gradually go up, 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 right? And that would be referred to as the righteous path.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at that in terms of your journey, a lot of guys want to sprint up the hill. My legs are strong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind some burn in my chest. I'll take this, right? And when I get to the top of the hill, whether it be profession or whatever else, we want to get to the top of the hill, and then we can learn whatever else. But now God's saying he leads us along righteous paths for his name's sake, because when we get to the top of the hill, and the top of the hill is often that end vision where we can see ourselves, that picture that God's placed in
Mm-hmm.
our hearts, right? He wants us to be a good steward of that position, not just for ourselves to say, okay, now I'm making bank and I have the title and I can put this on my bio, but for everybody else that is on their journey. How are we treating our people?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How are we stewarding the financial resource that we have? How are we managing the attention that we're suddenly getting from all kinds of people? Like we see a lot of people who at a super young age, they become successful in whatever, or maybe it's a matter of their parents had a company and they were just pulled in at a young age. And now it's a married guy or married lady, and now they're getting attention from all other kinds of people, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to handle it, and things fall flat. So I believe that God leads us along righteous paths, and in that process is a process of refining, so that
Yeah.
when we get to that place, we are good stewards. And when we say, I thank God, it's all God, right?
Yes.
Now we're saying that he placed us here. So in other words, everything that we do here reflects him and his mandate. So for his name's sake, he leads us along the righteous path. So that's also something I try to remember.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going through a struggle, if I lose a client, if something goes wrong, I'm like, okay, what is there that needing to be shed here in my mind? So what is there that I haven't taken responsibility for that I need to? Because when I get there, or when I move further along, I can't be negligent in this area. For example, budgeting. I can't be negligent in budgeting or in time management or whatever else it
Mm-hmm.
is, right? What are those things that I need to work on to prepare me or to equip me for that?
What you mentioned there is so powerful. The fact that, life is simply a process of refining. It's ultimately refining us to become who we need to be in order to serve
Yeah.
others and help others and make the biggest impact in the lives of others. So I think, no matter what you're doing, ultimately, it's about contribution. It's about connecting.
Yeah.
It's about
All for
giving.
sure.
You understand? So I think the most
Yeah.
important value as human beings that we have is ultimately our ability to connect with another human being. And that is the most empowering thing that we can do. To empower another person, we simultaneously empower ourselves. So well done
100%.
on so clearly describing that the importance of allowing life to refine you and your character. If you are enjoying this episode and would like some practical tips that you can use daily to thrive, then head over to coachedsuccess.com/thrive and download our 5 daily tips to thrive. That is coachedsuccess.com/thrive. Now let's get back to the episode. And then tell me, Russell, a bit about your personal rejections. So I know obviously you said that when you started out the bakery business that you decided, okay, now you're going to have to get clients and you went around to coffee
Yeah.
shops. Tell me a bit about your perception of rejection at that moment and how you dealt with it during the early days and how you deal
Yeah.
with it now.
Well, I had a huge chip on my shoulder, Carl.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that, at that time I hadn't accepted and made peace with where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of resenting the fact that I had to work so hard or go through this process where, I have to build this thing from scratch now because I felt entitled to my life as an actuarial scientist, right? That I had built up
Mm-hmm.
since grade nine. And I resented it. And I felt that I deserved better, right? And I had a huge chip on my shoulder as a young guy and thinking, looking at guys who, from my perspective, tend to have it easy. And I would just walk around thinking like, I deserve better than this, right? And as far as rejection goes, I don't know, like back then, it would kind of be fuel for me because just the competitor in me, comes out. And if you say no, there'll be five other people who are willing to say yes. So you're the fool, or it's your loss
Yes.
kind of thing. That was, like I said, like I was a young guy and that was my attitude. And I think sometimes it could come across a bit arrogant,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really not arrogance. It was just a matter of the mindset that I had to go in order to keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you say no to me, I'm like, okay, well, it's going to work anyway. You're just not going to be involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually said that. I remember we wanted to build this freelance platform in 2016. And I actually sat across from an investor, him and his wife, and still in touch with this guy. And I was applying, or I wanted to get funding from them for this, to build this
Mm-hmm.
thing. And they asked a lot of questions and eventually called me for a second meeting to their office. And he said, I see these holes and those holes and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, look, it's going to work. I'm going to make this work whether or not you come on board. So just tell
Mm-hmm.
me if you want, if you want to. So the guy didn't like that, but I mean, that's how I felt, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now I think today, this is how I see it now. Not every client is your client. Not every client is fit for me. Because
Yes.
again, the beginning I mentioned relationships, right? I want to build business. I don't believe you can separate business life and personal life. I don't believe there's such a thing really as work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is, but that's not what I'm striving for. I'm striving more for work-life integration,
Mm-hmm.
right? So with that being said, I need to have clients who does not disrupt my peace.
Yes.
And so if a client doesn't go my way, I get feedback from them. Why not? Okay. Is that something that I can implement, or is it just something that does not fit within how we want to do business? And then I wish them well. And usually I tell them, well, understand not going our way now and it's not going to work out now, but thank you for your time. And if you
Mm-hmm.
need anything, you have my number, my email address. Reach out, even if it's not work related. We have connected now, so that's how I try and do it now. Because ultimately, now again, it's not ego driven. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Back when I was starting out, it was very much ego driven because I wanted to prove that I'm gonna make $1 million before the age of 30, and it was very much ego
Yeah.
driven. And now I understand that I am walking out my kingdom purpose, right?
Yes.
And so I have to put my ego aside, or actually overcome my ego to a large extent, and be like, okay, well, if I'm representing the kingdom of God in my business world, how am I communicating with these people? What kind of flavor or taste am I leaving in their mouth?
Mm-hmm.
So now when it comes to rejection, I've also learned not to put too much on one deal. For example, if
Okay.
I was picking you for your business, whether it's for spiral marketing, PR, or whatever else, I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm going to communicate the value we can bring as clear as I can. But ultimately, I'm going to pray about it, and ultimately, the decision lies with you. If it
Yes.
doesn't work, or if you don't want to go with us, then I swiftly move on. So that's how I deal with it now.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there that you had a chip on your shoulder in the earlier days.
Yeah,
And I can relate to that where you feel like you are entitled to an easier
yeah,
life. But
yeah,
now I understand that. I actually read this earlier on your page where you were mentioning that life happens for you, not to you.
yeah,
So all the
yeah.
events, all the challenges is happening for you to become more of you, to become all that you are meant
More
to
of me.
be,
Yeah,
and to serve at the highest level possible. So
yeah,
so great. I can obviously relate, like I said there. And then you also mentioned the fact that in your earlier days, you told yourself whatever you needed to tell yourself in order to keep moving. And
yeah,
sometimes going into that dark zone is important to keep moving because if you didn't
yeah,
frame it in that way, you probably would have given up when people said, you know what, it's not going to work. But
yeah.
in that moment, you thought, listen, if I have to use my ego to move forward, then let me use my ego. So I will show you that it's going to work. So framing it in
Yeah.
that particular way, and it helped you move forward. Do you have any practices? Because obviously, overcoming your ego is not something that you just do and it's over. There will become moments where you maybe do go into ego state a little bit. How do you manage that right
Yeah.
now? Do you have any practices?
So, waking up in the early mornings and just having time to center myself. And I'm not super dogmatic about it. So I don't have like a strict boop, 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 this is what you do and you
Mm-hmm.
meditate. And all. I don't do that. What I do is, first thing I do, I get up out of bed to make coffee,
Mm-hmm.
just to have something to get me out of bed, because otherwise I'm gonna just go back to sleep. And then I just enjoy it and just in the moment. And that's the only time during the day really that I don't have anything that's chasing me or that
Mm-hmm.
I have to get to. So I just use that time to center myself and read a little bit of scripture and just remind myself of why I'm going to be doing whatever I'm going to be doing today. I think I've tasted a lot of failure enough to know that by my strength, that's where I'm going to end up every time. And so I really rely on God to carry me through a day. And so that's pretty much it. Like I think life has humbled me tremendously on
Yes.
multiple occasions.
Mm-hmm.
So I also have a strong fiance
Mm-hmm.
who, also helps to keep me in check, not combative, but, just keep me in line when I do tend to respond a little bit egotistical, whatever it is. And I think it also helps to have the freedom to express your situation. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think if I say, look, I have a huge ego and it's making me view things this way, or it's making me not want to speak to Kyle because I think that I'm better than him or I'm more talented than him.
Mm-hmm.
And I want him to know that. And until he concedes to the fact that I'm more talented than him or more successful than him, I don't want to sit around the camp with him because I don't want him for one
Yeah.
second thinking we are competitors or on the same level. That's how a lot of guys think. They aren't willing to admit it, but a lot of guys think that
Mm-hmm.
way. Like, who's going to be the alpha dog here? You come sit here at my feet kind of thing. Then we
Mm-hmm.
can be friends.
Yes.
But first, you have to know your place. And I think that stops so many amazing relationships from happening because everybody's waiting for the next person to concede, right? And we see that like in high school, we see it. There's groups, there's one guy who's like the dominant personality and the others just kind of go with his flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are so many leaders and so much collaboration that needs to happen. God raises up leaders and strong men and women. And if we can get over that place of being ego driven, I think our ego has a place, but not to control us, right? If we
Yes.
can get over that place of being driven by our ego, I think there's so much magic that can happen between connections and
Mm-hmm.
people. And yeah, I think, like I said, I've just failed enough times to know that in all my magic and my uniqueness, like I'm not it,
Mm-hmm.
only Jesus is it. So
Yes.
I have a lot of shortcomings, and that doesn't mean that I'm not an amazing person.
Yes.
And I think a lot of guys, we think that if I'm going to back myself, it means that I'm going to be blind to my shortcomings and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be blind to my erroneous beliefs, right? And I'm not going to be willing to admit that actually the problem wasn't with other people's lifestyle or their approach. Actually, that's theirs to enjoy. The problem was just that I had a chip on my shoulder about it because I felt that I'm entitled to that, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't have it. They're not even good people. They're partying and drinking and stuff. Why do they get to have that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why does their mom get to buy them a BMW in their first year of university?
Yeah.
Like, that guy's a clown. You know what I mean? Yeah, I am working hard, reading books, and yeah, I have to walk places, right? And so, like, it's theirs to enjoy. And the Lord just told me, well, don't you want to get to a place where you can do that for your child one day? So they don't have to start from scratch, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my parents had both. They worked in Cape Town. We lived in Stellenbosch when I was a child, Wraithby actually, to be precise, close to Stellenbosch. And they had to leave the house at 4:30 in the morning to catch a 5 a.m. train to go to Cape Town. And I'm thinking, I stand on their shoulders. I don't have to do that. Yes, they can't buy me a car in my first year or whatever, but I don't have to go take the train at 5 in the morning.
Exactly.
So now when I get to a place where I can do that for my children, do I want somebody else to stand there and be like, this kid sucks, you know what I mean? This spoiled brat. Or do I want to be like, wow, be inspired by that, the next guy. And so I realized that a lot of it is actually just me, like what I said earlier, that chip on my shoulder. And yeah, I'm just super honest with myself about my motives And sometimes it's uncomfortable because you realize, hey, those conversations I've had for years where I tried to explain that point,
Mm-hmm.
I was actually missing the point, right? That was actually me speaking from a place of wanting to protect my ego,
Mm-hmm.
or and so I had a professor who made this joke always. She made this example to demonstrate how the ego works, right? And she said the only reason she's not driving a Porsche is because
Mm-hmm.
her legs are too long and those cars are too low. It's just very uncomfortable to get in there. She won't waste her money on being uncomfortable. So that was such a powerful picture to me. Whenever something doesn't go our way, or whenever we don't have access to something, we make up a scenario in our minds that justifies that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like as leaders of businesses or just leaders of our lives, we have to be very mindful that our minds have the ability to do that.
Yes,
So you can quote unquote bullshit yourself
exactly.
your whole life long. Or you
Mm-hmm.
can be honest with yourself and be like, actually, you know, maybe I
Mm-hmm.
should reconsider my view on this thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's pretty much my ego journey.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of really powerful things there, especially some key takeaways, which was firstly the fact that your failures helped you disassociate from your ego because it made you realize that you're not all that great as you think you are. And
Yeah,
sometimes that's necessary. We need to fail. We need to fall to realize that this is part of the journey. This is part of the journey of who you're going to become, and that you
yeah,
can lose everything tomorrow. It's not about that.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
also you mentioned the fact that centering yourself in the morning has helped you a lot, and having the time for yourself so that you're not waking up in a reactive mode, because most of us are going through our days reactive. Waking up, my alarm goes off now, I have 1 hour to get done before catching the train to work. So you're just constantly busy, instead of creating the time where you're able
yeah,
to reflect on your life, reflect on your journey, reflect on your intentions for the day and what you want to achieve
yeah,
and accomplish for the day. And also the fact of gratitude. Gratitude can help or can save you from the entitlement myth, let's say, where
yeah,
you think that I need to get this or I should have a job. Unemployment's this high. Why? It's unfair. I
yeah,
completed my university degree, but I'm still not getting a job.
yeah,
But by being able to look at life from different eyes and actually
yeah,
being grateful for what you have and where you are, that can help you from that trap. I just wanted to say, Russell, thank you so much for being on the call today. It was a really informative discussion and getting to know you, getting to know your journey, the way you think,
yeah,
and the power that faith has played in your life as well. So awesome, awesome job, and
yeah.
thank you for the impact that you are making.
Thank you, Carl,
Hmm.
for what you're doing as well. Providing the platform for people to
Hmm.
share their stories. I think there is, storytelling is a very ancient art,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of cultures and lessons are preserved through storytelling. So thank you, Carl.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. This is a weekly podcast, so tune in every Monday to get your dose of inspiration that will help guide you in designing your version of an extraordinary life. This is Kyle Daniels, wishing you an amazing day. Stay winning.